Remember, do not underestimate the power of PlayStation.
The universe looks at you and sees a hero. But do you know what I see? A coward. Someone who lost the guts to find his race.
Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus is the last mainline title in the series before a recent reboot on the PlayStation 4. Released in late 2013 for the PlayStation 3, it was the first air quote, real Ratchet game since 2009's A Crack in Time. It was developed by Insomniac Games, and I believe that to be the Burbank studio. In 2008, Insomniac opened a branch in North Carolina who developed Full Frontal Assault and All for One, but I can't quite find out who was responsible for the bulk of work on this title. I feel like both studios probably had a hand in it, but alas. This game serves as an epilogue to the Future series. It was released on a budget price, and while not as short as Quest for Booty, isn't as long as A Crack in Time. It's also notably the first mainline title in the series to target 30 frames per second instead of the usual 60. This is technically inferior and worth pointing out, but I have more gripes with it beyond that, which I'll talk about when I bring up gameplay. If you'd like to skip any story spoilers, skip to here. The game begins with our Lombaxan robot helping to escort one of two criminal siblings, Vendra Prague, aboard a huge spaceship. They're also joined by Kronk and Zephyr, returning from earlier entries in the Future series. Vendra, like Ratchet, is looking for her own species. Known as the Space Witch, she and her brother Neftin were born in a parallel universe called the Netherverse, and were assumedly sent to the current universe by their parents. Raised in an orphanage where they were picked on for being different, Vendra came into contact with a being from the Netherverse called Mr. I, who promised to bring them home if she could open a portal between their realms. As you might expect, Vendra escapes thanks to Neftin raiding Ratchet's ship, killing Kronk and Zephyr in the process, even though they're robots, and sends Ratchet plummeting into space. Thankfully, he manages to maneuver onto one of the Prague's underlings' ships and stows away. Filled with desire to keep harm from happening to others like Kronk and Zephyr, Ratchet & Clank aim to stop the Pragues in their plan to open a portal to the Netherverse. After the Crack in Time review, I've decided it's better to save your time and mine by not going over every point of the plot. Unless it's a game that mostly lives or dies by its narrative, or unless I have a statement to make in general, I'd like to leave more of it up to you to experience for yourself. But I'll still be touching on some things. So with that out of the way, Into the Nexus feels kind of like a Halloween special, and I know that sounds weird, but stick with me. Putting the creepier game atmosphere aside even, the game deals with things like Vendra being referred to as a witch, other dimensions being explored, otherworldly monsters instead of the usual aliens, and even a weapon specifically crafted to scare enemies and distract them. It's a really unique feel for the series, and I really liked it. This, alongside Quest for Booty's pirate-themed romp, kind of makes me want to see what other themes Insomniac could tackle with this series. When it comes to the villains, I wound up really wanting to like Vendra and Neftin more than I did. A curse of how short the game is that we just don't get enough time with them. And that's not to say I didn't like them, but I felt like there is potential that wasn't fully tapped here. Vendra is fueled by a desire to be with her own kind, which is a rather noble ideal, but her foundation crumbles more and more throughout the game, until she ultimately faces betrayal from a being she has known for years. And it's a really cool idea. I really wanted to see her emotions explored more. Neftin ultimately seems like a criminal who's primarily doing it to keep an eye on his sister, which was kinda sweet. The game was advertised as a way to wrap up a few loose ends, which it achieves. I just wish it could have had more of a chance to tie those knots a bit tighter. I'm hoping the two Pragues can be brought back in the newly forged reboot universe and given more of a chance to shine. So let's talk gameplay. I've been told by friends who are fans of the series that Into the Nexus follows Full Frontal Assault's gameplay basics, but I haven't played that yet, so let's just take their word on it. A few inputs got swapped, and Ratchet feels a bit more stiff to maneuver around, but all in all, it's the Ratchet you know and love. I think I actually preferred how Crack in Time felt a bit, but what we have here isn't bad by any stretch. Most of the things you would expect to be here are here. Platforming, exploring, combat, weird weapons, weapon levels, Raritanium-based weapon upgrades, a good sense of humor. Into the Nexus has it. There are a few new curveballs thrown in. There's a grav tether where you point at big panels with red circles on them and press the circle button to establish a sort of floating bridge between the two. Jumping into these narrow spaces will pull you from one to the other thanks to a gravity flow. These pop up often throughout the game, and while I wouldn't necessarily call them a puzzle, they are incorporated well enough to make you scratch your head a couple of times, as opposed to always being so obvious that you question their inclusion. Their implementation and sound design kind of reminds me a little of Portal, which is a good thing. There are also some kookier weapons introduced too, my favorite being the Winterizer, which turns enemies into snowmen while playing Jingle Bells. The weapons aren't really too much to write home about, but considering the game length, there are a nice variety here. They work nicely against the enemy AI, which are interesting to fight, especially on higher difficulties. I particularly liked fighting Nethers, which teleport around the areas and really keep you on your toes and checking all around you. The main new additions are some 2D sections in the Netherverse. These have you controlling Clank and manipulating gravity to maneuver to an end beast called a Nether and guiding it back to the opening in Ratchet & Clank's universe. These are how you can progress past obstacles throughout the narrative and are an interesting addition. They sort of reminded me of the Quark levels from Up Your Arsenal, just more interesting instead of humorous. Oh, and prepare to die on these sections, ladies and gentlemen. They are by no means hard, but you are definitely going to get caught off guard by disorienting gravity play and lose track of where things are going and where you need to be heading from time to time. Thankfully, generous checkpointing alleviates mostly any problem presented by that disorientation, so while I felt some slight frustrations, it was really no big deal. I do wonder how these sections hold up on numerous replays, but on a first time through, they didn't pop up too often or too little. Another new implementation arrives by the way of, oh hey, there's a smuggler again. You know, it hit me in this game that the smuggler is really just Moneybags from Insomniac's Spyro games, just somehow even more of an asshole. And I love him for that. Anyway, on the planet where you can find him, you can defeat some large monsters to gather horns to trade to him for equipment. Eventually you win a hover pack in an arena tournament that lets you fly around for as much gas as you have. This mainly serves as a way to get to different areas, but it's a new, more relaxed way to explore areas as opposed to the past. The entire planet is a hunting grounds of sorts, like some prior entries in the series, but it feels much cooler to hover around and explore instead of doing it all on foot. This isn't something that changes anything in a drastic way, but it's a nice new wrinkle to things. Okay, so let's tackle the elephant in the room, the frame rate. It's a big deal that the game opted for 30 instead of 60, since it is a technically inferior performance that gives the player less frames to react to and with. I got used to this change. Then I played the new Ratchet & Clank on PS4, which also targeted 30 before writing this review, and I realized that even while Into the Nexus targets 30 frames per second, it has moments where it dips even below that, resulting in an experience that's sometimes choppy. This wasn't like hitting a brick wall or anything, but it was certainly a wake-up call to how nice things were before. If the very notion of a sub 60 FPS Ratchet game sickens you, Into the Nexus isn't for you. If you can adapt, you're all good, but expect a fluctuating rate. So, notoriously, Insomniac stopped targeting 60 frames per second in 2009 to focus on more graphical power to wow consumers more. And I'll say that Into the Nexus looks nice. The places you'll visit range from eerie, haunting caverns and buildings, a drab city, a bustling city, a damp swamp, and a harsh arena. While there aren't many worlds, even the arena is more of a mission select than an expansive world, each feel distinct and are memorable enough. The planet sort of reminded me of earlier games in the series for reasons I can't quite put my finger on, which was nice, and I think it was a bit intentional. I'd also be remiss not to mention the game's music score, which was handled by Michael Bross and recorded live. It serves to give the game a very unique vibe and atmosphere from the rest of the series and is very nicely composed. So overall, Into the Nexus is a nice, compact Ratchet & Clank game. It doesn't end too shortly like Quest for Booty, but it makes me feel even more convinced that Insomniac has enough creativity and know-how that they shouldn't limit themselves on games intentionally designed to be shorter than an air quote standard experience. Into the Nexus introduces nice new ideas for the series, as mentioned before, but they ultimately just seem to disappear as you start getting the hang of them. I would have loved more intricate grav tether sections or another planet to use the hover pack on. As it stands, you can only use the hover pack on just one planet specifically designed for it, and on a few other short areas in the game. When it comes to that planet I mentioned, there's not much else to that world than just hovering around hunting beasts. And with an entire area just dedicated to an arena that you can wrap up relatively quickly, there's just a weird balance and an overall lack of cohesion to the worlds in this game. The final planet is more of a museum tour with a simple city area before the final boss even, making for only a few truly intricate areas to explore in the game. When Into the Nexus is good, it's really good. Navigating some of these enjoyably eerie worlds was really fun, and the story premise kept me glued so that I nearly finished the game in a night, purely from my own desire to see what came next from the plot and gameplay. But at the end of it, I really wish Into the Nexus had just been another standard, full-fledged entry in the future series, instead of a specifically crafted epilogue game. That said, the game will always be a standout to me in this series due to its unique tone that I've really enjoyed. If you haven't played it, I hope you do, and I hope you appreciate one of the more odd entries in the Ratchet & Clank series. But that just about does it for us here, folks. Up next on my list is the newly released PS4 reboot, simply titled Ratchet & Clank. After that, I plan on seeing the movie and having a discussion about it with my friends FTA and TronJon, which I should hopefully be able to conduct shortly after the movie releases. Hoping to see you there. This has been MeKonosFan, and thank you very much for watching. And I'll catch you next time on Learning to Love PlayStation.